نعم تفضل.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. As you know, inshallah ta'ala, our topic for this session, the negated attributes not ascribed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And inshallah ta'ala, we will commence this session by giving a brief explanation as to what is meant by the negated attributes not ascribed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and some principles concerning these negated attributes that are not associated, that are not ascribed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then we will expound by giving some examples, inshallah ta'ala, some examples until the time is over, inshallah ta'ala. First, with regards to the definition, or with regards to what is regarded as the negated attributes that are not ascribed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The negated attributes in Arabic, or when you study the books of Aqidah, they are normally referred to as as-sifat al-manfiya or as-sifat as-salbiya. And as many of the scholars, they mention, including Shaykh Muhammad ibn Salih al-Usaymin, rahimahullah, that there is no difference between these two names in this topic that we are talking about. And also there is no harm in using the word as-salbiya or using the word al-manfiya, because the linguistic meaning of salb is negating something, So as-sifat al-manfiya or as-sifat as-salbiya, in case you hear me using this terminology, you know that I'm referring to the negated attributes that are not ascribed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What are the negated attributes? These attributes, they are the descriptions and attributes that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala negates from himself, or the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam negates from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is, up to there is technically the definition. Now for additional clarity, I add this phrase, whether directly being mentioned, meaning whether these attributes that are negated are directly mentioned, or they are indirectly mentioned by the affirmation of the opposite of what is negated. And we will explain that inshallah ta'ala. So the negated attributes, it refers to those attributes, those descriptions that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he negates from himself and he free himself of, or he's free himself from. Or the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam negates from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and free Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from. As we know that the source of our knowledge, our deen, is the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. This is the source of our deen. So we do not negate anything, or we do not affirm anything except through these two sources. Now these attributes may be negated by being mentioned directly. Like in the example we have on the page, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, Lam yalid. He never had an offspring. He never gave birth to anything. That is something, a description, an attribute he negates directly. Lam yalid. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he mentioned that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says about himself in the hadith, Qudsi inni haramtu dhulm ala nafsi. I made dhulm, oppression, forbidden upon myself. And in the Quran, وَمَا رَبُّكَ بِظَلَّامٍ, and your Lord is not oppressive. So all of these examples, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he negates them directly. Or they are indirectly being negated by Allah mentioned the affirmation of the opposite. For example, we have وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, and he is as-Sami' al-Basir. He is the ever hearing, or the all hearing, the one who hears everything, the one who sees everything, and his hearing and his sight is complete and perfect to be fitting of his majesty. That will negate that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is blind, and negate that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is deaf. So mentioning that Allah is as-Sami' negates the opposite of it. Negates the opposite of it. So these are the two ways in which we know of an attribute, or we know of a description being negated from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the note that I mentioned, this has to do with some of the principles concerning these negated attributes. The first is the negated attributes are a subjoined or a follow-up to the affirmative attributes, or a completion to them. Sifat al-naf tabi'atun li sifat al-ithbat wa mukammilatun laha. Meaning the asl, the foundation is the affirmation, those attributes that we affirm to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, those names and attributes that we affirm to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is the asl, that is the foundation. And then you have those things that are negated. They are a tabi', they are like a subjoined, they are a follow-up. They complete what has been affirmed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this issue here is not something, this is something the scholars, they mention. As Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, he said that ma'rifatullah laysat bi ma'rifat sifat as-salb. Shaykh al-Islam rahimahullah, he mentioned in his Majmu' al-Fatawa, he said that knowing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not by knowing the negated attributes. That is not the asl, that is not the basic default or the foundation, the fundamental principle. Bal al-asl fiha sifat al-ithbat. He said the foundation, the default is what? Is the descriptions of affirmation, those descriptions that we affirm to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and establish for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For example, Allah sees everything and he hears everything. That is the asl. That is the asl. We know Allah by knowing that he sees everything. We know Allah by knowing that he is the just. We know Allah by knowing that he is the one and the only. And then what these things negate, or the opposite of these things, is a tabi', is a completion for it. The fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees everything and hears everything shows that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he is perfect in his attributes, and he's perfect in his names, and he is not blind, and he is not unaware, and he's not negligent, and so on. Was-salb tabi', and these negation, it is a follow-up or a subjoin to those things that we attribute to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَمَقْصُودُهُ تَكْمِيلَ الْإِثْبَاتِ. And he said the intent of these negated attributes is to complete that which we affirm. We affirm these things to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by affirming that which he affirmed to himself, and these attributes that we affirm to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the intent of it or sorry, we negate the things that we negate from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the intent of it is to show the completeness of that which we affirm to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We negate oppression from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in order to show the completeness of his justice. For example, كما أشرنا إليه من أن كل تنزيه مدح به الرب فنفيه إثبات. As he said, that we have indicated this, that every glorification, everything that we free Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from, praising him, doing so, meaning everything that we praise Allah by freeing him from these deficiency and glorifying him by freeing him from these deficiency, فَنَفْيُهُ إِثْبَاتٌ. Freeing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from these things is actually an affirmation, And also with regards to the second principle, and that is we do not affirm, the same way we do not affirm something to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without evidence, we don't negate something from him without evidence. The first part is obvious. For example, we do not say about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala anything without evidence. We don't say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a hand that befits his majesty without evidence. We do not say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we describe him as Sami', as Basir, as Alim, as Halim, as Kareem. All of these names, we affirm it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with their attributes because we have evidence for them from the Quran and from the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And similarly, the same way we do not affirm these names and attributes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, similarly we do not negate anything from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without evidence. And this part here is very important to pay attention to, because we may think that certain things is obviously we cannot attribute it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it's very obvious that we cannot attribute it to Allah. But everything that we cannot attribute to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there is evidence for it. And we need to know these evidences. For example, it's obvious that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he is rich and he's not poor. We negate from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala poverty. But there is evidence also to prove that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not poor. And we should not be tricked into only using our intellect, even though we know the evidence, or using our intellect to justify that which we negate from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because as we know, there are sects and there are groups and there are misguided paths that negate from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala many of those things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala affirmed for himself. And that is why is it they do so is because they fall into that trap of using their intellect. So that door is closed completely. Anything that you want to negate from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, make sure you know the evidence for it, no matter how obvious you may think it is. Because if once you open that door, you might not be able to close it if you are to face some of these people of misguidance who negate from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that which Allah himself has affirmed from him for himself, and they negate these things, claiming that the intellect does not accept that these things are befitting for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So anything that we negate from Allah, we have to have evidence for it, no matter if it is obvious to us. Now, there's another principle. I just realized I did not mention it, or maybe I did mention it in the second. Yes, I did mention it. The third principle, and that is with regards to negating the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whenever something is being negated, an attribute is being negated from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that negation implies two things. this attribute, the first thing is that this attribute is not one of his attributes. And the second thing, its opposite is to be affirmed in the most perfect manner. Whenever we negate something, we have to affirm two things. One, or that negation implies two things. One of that indication is that this attribute is not to be affirmed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is not an attribute of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the second of those two things is that the opposite is to be affirmed. And why is that so? Okay, let's take an example. Let's take the example of zulm, oppression. If we negate oppression from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we have to affirm the opposite of it. And that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is completely just. And listen to the statement of Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah. Where he went? Okay. Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah, what he said is that it should be understood that negation of an attribute ينبغي أن يعلم أن النفي ليس فيه مدح ولا كمال إلا إذا تضمن إثباتا. He said that it should be understood that negation of an attribute does not imply praise or perfection unless it implies an affirmation of its opposite. And we will explain inshallah ta'ala, but let's read out the statement. وَإِلَّا فَمُجَرَّدَ النَّفْ لَيْسَ فِيهِ مَدْحٌ وَلَا كَمَالٌ. He said that just the mere negation, just negating something, there is no praise in just negating something, or no completeness in just negating something. When you just negate something from someone, that mere negation is not a praise for that individual, nor is it a perfection or show some completeness with regards to that individual. لأن النفي المض عظم محض. Because pure negation is nothing. Pure negation is nothing. والعظم المحض ليس بشيء. And what is nothing is nothing. Technically, that is what he's saying. What is nothing is nothing. It's obvious that what is nothing is nothing. وما ليس بشيء فهو كما قيل ليس بشيء. فضلا عن يكون مدحا أو كمالا. And if it is nothing, then more so it cannot be a praise and it cannot be a perfection or completeness for that which you are negating that attribute from. وَلِأَنَّ النَّفْعَ الْمَحْض يُوصَفْ بِهِ الْمَعْدُومِ. Because pure negation, you describe something that doesn't exist with pure negation. وَالْمُمْتَنِعْ وَالْمَعْدُومِ وَالْمُمْتَنِعْ لَا يُوصَفُ بِمَدْحٍ وَلَا كَمَالٍ. And that which does not exist cannot be described in any sense of praise or perfection. And a similar statement was made by Sheikh Muhammad ibn Salih al-Uthaymin rahimahullah. He said, ما نفاه الله عن نفسه فالمراد به بيان انتفاؤه. Whatever Allah negates from himself, then what is meant is to show that this thing is negated from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala لِثُبُوتِ كَمَالِ ضِدِّهِ, in order to establish the completeness of the opposite of it. لا مجرد نفيه, not mere negating that thing. لأن النفي ليس بكمال, because just negating something is not perfection. إلا أن يتضمن ما يدل على الكمال, except that negation consists of what proves and shows completeness or perfection. وذلك لأن النفي عدم, that is because negating something shows non-existence of something. والعدم ليس بشيء, and the non-existence of something is nothing. فضلا عن يكون كمالا, more so if it is nothing, then more so it's not going to be any perfection, is not going to be any praise. And then he mentioned an example, and this is going to clarify everything if what was mentioned is confusing, of all of the theory and all of the statement was confusing. This example that he gave is going to clarify everything, inshallah. As it is said, بالمثال يتبين المقال. With the example, the statement is made clear. He said, كما لو قلت الجدار لا يظلم. If you were to say that the wall does not oppress, if you were to say that this wall, this house is not oppressive, this wall is not oppressive, negating oppression from the wall is not a praise. That is because the wall does not even have the ability to oppress. It doesn't have it's not suitable for oppression in the first place. Or وقد يكون للعجز عن القيام به. Or let's say you negate oppression from a person. He has no hands and he has no feet. He has to be fed, and you said this man here, he is not oppressive. This man here is not oppressive. He's not tyrannical. That there is not necessarily a praise for him. Maybe in his heart, he desires to be oppressive, but because he does not have any hands and feet to go about with his oppression, that is what is preventing him from his oppression. Similarly, the wall, negating oppression from the wall or from a what you call it, a inanimate object, is not praised for that thing because they don't have the ability to oppress in the first place. So that is what they are explaining, that just mere negation of something, there is no praise in that thing and there is no perfection in just mere negation. That is why it's important that when we negate something or when something is negated from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it is important that what? It is important that we implement these two principles. That is, we negate that attribute from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and we affirm the opposite in the most perfect manner, because that is what is meant by the negation. That is what is meant by the negation. For example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we will go through some examples, inshallah ta'ala, and it will make clear everything. But so a quick review of these three principles in general that we did. The first principle is that the negated action attributes are subjoined or a follow-up to the affirmative attributes, meaning the asl, the default, is that which we affirm to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the negation is like a completion and a follow-up to that which we affirm to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Second, we do not negate anything without evidence. The same way we do not affirm anything without evidence, we do not negate anything without evidence from the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the third is that when something is negated, these two things have to be applied, and that is negating that attribute and affirming the opposite of it in the most complete manner. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, وَعْدَ اللَّهِ لَا يُخْلِفُ اللَّهُ وَعْدَهُ. The promise of Allah, this is the promise of Allah in Surah Rum, لَا يُخْلِفُ اللَّهُ وَعْدَهُ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he does not break his promise. He does not fail in his promise. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he negates from himself breaking promise. And that is because of what? That is because of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala completeness and his perfection with regards to him, with regards to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being truthful. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his might and his power and his strength. A person may not break his promise because maybe he don't make any promise in the first place. So just negating something does not necessitate that it is a perfection. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he does not break his promise to show the completeness of Allah's truthfulness, show the completeness of Allah's power and ability. And even if we were to say that this person does not break his promise, he might not be able to fulfill his promise because of lack of strength and the lack of ability to fulfill those promises. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala negating that he does not break his promise, it shows that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it is to establish that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is complete in his truthfulness, he's complete in his power and his ability to fulfill his promise. In another verse in Surah Al-An'am, قُلْ أَغَيْرَ اللَّهِ أَتَّخِذُ وَلِيًّا فَاطِرِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَهُوَ يُطْعِمُ وَلَا يُطْعَمُ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he mentioned, وَهُوَ يُطْعِمُ وَلَا يُطْعَمُ. He feeds and he is not fed. He feeds and he is not fed. And this here, he feeds, that's an attribute that is an affirmative attribute. But the second part, he is not fed. That is the sifa al-manfiya or a sifa as-salbiya, the negated attribute. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he is not fed. He does not eat. Now, why is it Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what does that indicate? What we negate from Allah that he is not fed. But remember, we have to affirm the total opposite in its complete form. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he is not fed because of his ghina, because of his richness, because of his samadiyah. He is self-sufficient. He is not in need of anything or anyone, and everyone is in need of him. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he is the razaq. He is the one who provides for everything. Nothing provides for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you were to say, and similarly, if you just negating this attribute without affirming the opposite is not praise. If you are to say that the wall does not eat anything, the wall does not eat anything, that does not apply. There is no praise with regards to that. Even a human being, if you are to say that this individual, he didn't eat for 10 days, not because of his strength and power and ability, because he is sick, because something is wrong with him, he's crippled or paralyzed or something. So we see that just mere negation, there is no completeness and perfection in the mere negation until we affirm the total opposite of it. وَقَالَتِ الْيَهُودِ يَدُ اللَّهِ مَغْلُولَةً. In this verse here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala negating from himself being stingy and not spending as the Jews, and he negates that from himself by mentioning what the Jews, they mention about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They say that Allah's hand are chained. Ta'ala Allahu amma yaquluna uluwan kabira. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he said, غُلَّتْ أَيْدِيهِمْ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cursed them and doom them. غُلَّتْ أَيْدِيهِمْ. May their hands be chained. وَلُعِنُوا. May they be cursed, meaning may they be distanced from the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. بَلْ يَدَاهُ مَبْسُوطَتَانِ. Rather, his hands are extended. His hands are extended. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he spends. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he is the most generous. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he is the Kareem, and he is the Razzaq, and he is the Mu'ti. So by negating Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, negating that he does not spend, to show the completeness of his spending and the completeness of his generosity and the completeness of his ata, of his giving. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in many places of the Quran, he negates from himself a sahiba and a walad, sorry. وَأَنَّهُ تَعَالَى جَدُّ رَبِّنَا مَتَّخَذَ صَاحِبَةً وَلَا وَلَدًا. The jinn, they said that from the things that they learn is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he has not taken a wife, nor has he taken a son. لَمْ يَلِدْ وَلَمْ يُولَدْ. He didn't give birth to anything, nor was he begotten. لَمْ يَلِدْ وَلَمْ يُولَدْ. أَنَّا يَكُونُ لَهُ وَلَدْ وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ صاحبة. How is it can he have a son, a child, and he did not have a spouse? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala negates from himself having a walad, having a child, a son, and having a sahiba, a spouse. And similarly, we negate this from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have to affirm the total opposite. Why is it Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he is not befitting of having a wife and having a spouse or having a child? It is not befitting for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because of the kamal of Allah's richness again, and because of the kamal of Allah's self-sufficiency and the completeness of Allah's richness, the completeness of his self-sufficiency. He is as-Samad al-Qayyum. Because of the wahdaniyah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the rububiyyah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the lordship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is not possible for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to have a son or to have a child or to have a spouse. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in another verse, he mentioned, Wallahu la yastahyi min al-haq. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he is not shy from the of the truth. He is not shy of the truth, of making the truth clear. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala negates from himself being shy of the truth, meaning of making the truth clear. And as Allah mentioned this negation in not many verses, in other verses, and it is mentioned in the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says in Surah Baqarah, Inna Allah la yastahi ay yadriba mathalan ma ba'udatan fama fawqaha. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not shy to strike the parable of a flying insect or something that is even smaller than it or bigger than it. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, Wallahu la yastahi min al-haq. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not shy of the truth. And the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, or in the hadith of Salama, a woman came to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam and she said, Ya Rasulullah, inna Allah la yastahi min al-haq. Indeed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he is not shy from the truth. And then she asks the question, Hal ala al-mar'a ghuslun idha ihtamalat? Is it upon the woman to make a ghusl? Does a woman have to make ghusl, a complete bath, if she have a wet dream? And this hadith is collected in Bukhari and Muslim. And the Prophet ﷺ, he did not object to the woman saying that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he is not shy from the truth. And we have to be careful. Many people, they make the mistake by saying Allah is not shy, by saying that Allah is not shy without completing the statement. What is important to complete the statement. It is important to complete the statement. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not shy from the truth, in affirming the truth, and that is because of the completeness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in his wisdom and his justice and his superiority and his completeness in clarifying the truth, his wisdom, because wisdom necessitates that when something needs to be known, it is to be known, it is made clear. And the same thing with justice and clarifying the truth. But if someone who is shy to clarify the truth, or they see oppression being done and they are shy to clarify or to make that oppression, make the oppression known, meaning that, and correct that oppression, then that is a weakness. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because of his completeness in his justice, his completeness in his wisdom, his completeness in his in clarifying the truth, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he is not shy from the truth. أَوَلَمْ يَرَوْا أَنَّ اللَّهَ الَّذِي خَلَقَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَلَمْ يَعْيَ بِخَلْقِهِمْ. Another negation, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he mentioned, do they not see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who created the heavens and the earth and has and he was not tired with their creation. And in another verse, Allah mentioned the creation of the heavens and the earth, and he said, وَمَا مَسَّنَا مِن لُغُوبٍ, no tiredness touch us. No tiredness touch us. And similarly, we negate from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tiredness. We negate from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being affected by the thing that he does. Why is it? Because of the completeness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in his might and in his power and in his ability. The completeness and the perfection of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in his strength and in his quwwah and in his qudrah. And nothing can overcome Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because similarly with these negation, just negating the mere negation is no praise in it until we affirm the complete opposite of it. Someone may claim that they are not tired, they did something and they said, I'm not tired. But that is not because of their complete strength and ability. Could be that the work was not difficult. Could be that they didn't work for a long period of time. The task was very simple. So, or they had a lot of aid with them to assist them. So they were not tired. So just negating the tiredness, negating the weariness is not a completion unless you affirm the complete of the opposite, the completeness of the opposite, and that is the complete strength and might and power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, it seems that I didn't add the remaining slides, but inshallah ta'ala we will complete them, so pay attention. From amongst the things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala he negates from himself is the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam he negates from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-awar. As the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam in the hadith of Abdullah ibn Umar, he said that ذكر النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يوما بين ظهري الناس المسيح الدجال فقال إن الله ليس بأعور ألا إن المسيح الدجال أعور العين اليمنى. Abdullah ibn Umar, he said that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam one day among them, he mentioned the Masih al-Dajjal. He mentioned al-Masih al-Dajjal. He mentioned the Dajjal. And then he said about the Dajjal that indeed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he is not a'war. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he is not a'war. And a'war meaning one-eyed, meaning the person on the a'war, someone who is a'war, he only have one eye. Ala inna al-Masih Dajjal a'war al-ayn al-yumna. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said that the Masih Dajjal, he is blind in the right eye. And this negation, as we said, is to show the complete perfectness of the total opposite. And that is to show the complete perfection of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he has two eyes that befit his majesty and befit his perfection. And as we know with the names and the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I'm sure that the other speakers, they cover that in detail, is that we affirm them to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without any tamthil, without any tashbih, without any ta'til or anything, any takyif. We affirm them to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without imagining how is it, without likening it to his creation, without giving it making anything similar to the names and the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we do not negate the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because of our intellect. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he has two complete perfect eyes that befits his majesty. Other than that, there will be no need for the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam to say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he is not He is not a'war. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, وَمَا اللَّهُ بِغَافِلٍ عَمَّا يَعْمَلُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he is not negligent about that which they are doing. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he negates from himself negligence. وَمَا كُنَّا عَنِ الْخَلْقِ غَافِلِينَ. We were not negligent about the creation. And the negation of negligence from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is to show kamal ilmihi, to show the completeness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knowledge, wa ihatatihi, and the completeness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala encompassing everything, and his completeness in his ability, and the completeness of his hifz, safeguarding everything. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he negates from himself creating the creation out of play and without any reason, without any purpose. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, رَبَّنَا مَا خَلَقَتَ هَذَا بَاطِلًا سُبْحَانَكَ. O our Lord, you have not created this batilan, in vain, without any purpose. Subhanak, glory be to you, free is you from such claim, from any imperfection. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, وَمَا خَلَقَنَا السَّمَاءَ وَالْأَرْضَ وَمَا بَيْنَهُمَا لَاعِبِينَ. We have not created the heavens and the earth and that which is between them in play. أَفَحَسِبَتُمْ أَنَّمَا خَلَقَنَاكُمْ عَبَثًا. Do you think that we have created you in vain, without any purpose? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he negates all of this from himself. Why? لِإِثْبَاتْ كَمَالِ حِكْمَتِهِ, to show the completeness of his wisdom, and the completeness of his knowledge, and the completeness of his jalal, his glory, and his magnificence. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he negates from himself al-ajz, inability. وَلَا يَحْسَبَنَّ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا سَبَقُوا إِنَّهُمْ لَا يُعْجِزُونَ. Let not those who disbelieve think that they have outrun us, and they have outrun us and get away from us. إِنَّهُمْ لَا يُعْجِزُونَ. They will not be able to make Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala unable to take control of them, or unable to take them for their action and punish them. وَعَلَمُوا أَنَّكُمْ غَيْرُ مُعْجِزِ اللَّهِ. Know that you will never be able to cause Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be unable to punish you and unable to take you to account. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala negate from himself ajz. وَأَنَّا ظَنَنَّا أَلَّن نُعْجِزَ اللَّهَ فِي الْأَرْضِ. We will not be able to outrun Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this earth, meaning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there is nothing that we can do to cause Allah to have the inability to take us to account and to punish us and to discipline us. And the reason for this negation, or what we affirm with this negation, after negating that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not, la ya'tarihi ajz, just is not suffer from ajz, inability, is because of affirming the completeness of the opposite. Affirming the completeness of the opposite, which is kamal quwwatihi wa qudratihi, the completeness of his strength, the completeness of his power, wa nufudh mashi'atihi, the completeness of him being able to carry out his will and carry out his commandment. Whatever he carry out, he will that the city be destroyed, the people be destroyed. It is going to happen, and they will not be able to cause Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be unable to do so. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he negates from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as-samam wal-ghayba, not being able to hear or not being present. As Abi Musa al-Ashari, he said that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, or they were with the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, فكنا مع رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وكنا إذا أشرفنا على واد هللنا وكبرنا ارتفعت أصواتنا. That they were with the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and every time they will pass by a valley, and they will do the tahleel, and they will do the takbir, they will raise their voice loud. And the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said to them, Ya ayyuhan nas, O people, irba'u ala anfusikum, have mercy upon yourself, take it easy upon yourself. فَإِنَّكُمْ لَا تَدْعُونَ أَصَمْ وَلَا غَائِبًا, because you're not calling upon someone who is asam, who is deaf and who is not present. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he negates from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being asam, being deaf, and that is why, and that is to affirm the completeness of the opposite, which is to affirm the completeness of his hearing. And he negates from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala al-ghayba, being absent. That is because to affirm the completeness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's qurb, his nearness, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's always there. He's qayyuma. He affirm that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is al-qayyum and al-samad, that He is the one who is always there looking after the affairs of His servants and His slaves and His creation. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He negates from Himself al-faqr. لقد سمع الله قول الذين قالوا إن الله فقير ونحن أغنياء. Allah has heard those, meaning the Jews, those who say that Allah is poor and they are rich. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala negates from Himself al-faqr, poverty, which affirms for Him the completeness of His richness and the completeness of His sovereignty and the completeness of His dominion and His samadiyah, He being self-sufficient and everything being in need of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He negates from Himself al-kufu, lam yakul lahu kufuwan ahad. Excuse me. There is no one that is similar and equal to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and parable to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the negation of kufr from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, negating that He have a kufu, have someone resembling Him, similar to Him, equal to Him, parable to Him, is to show the completeness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His oneness in everything. Show the completeness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His oneness in everything. Negating that Allah have a kuf, have someone similar and equal and parable to Him, affirms, negates that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have anyone who is similar to Him in any of His names and attributes, and it affirms for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala His completeness and His perfection in all of His names and attributes. There is no one similar to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with His knowledge and His hearing and His seeing and His ability and His wisdom and His justice. And it shows that the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in His hearing and His seeing and His justice and His ability and His qudrah, His power. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He negates from Himself an-nisyan. وَمَا رَبُّكَ وَمَا كَانَ رَبُّكَ نَسِيًّا. And your Lord was never forgetful. لا يضل ربي ولا ينسى. Musa alayhi salam, he said about Allah, لا يضل, He does not stray, ولا ينسى, and He does not forget. Affirming the completeness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in His knowledge and encompassing of everything, and the completeness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in His justice and His idrak, His awareness. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He negates from Himself an-nu'as and an-nawm, drowsiness and sleeping and sleeping. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, Allahu la ilaha illa huwa al-hayyul qayyum la ta'khudhuhu sinatun wa la nawm. No sinner and no nawm overcomes Him. No drowsiness overcomes Him. No sleep overcomes Him. And that is, as we said, to show the completeness of the total opposite, the completeness and the perfection of the total opposite. Show the completeness and the perfection of Allah's life, the completeness and the perfection of Allah's looking after the creation and taking care of the creation, the completeness and perfection of His power and ability. If you were to negate Naum from someone, this person does not have the ability to sleep, or he is not sleeping, or the likes of those things, because of a sickness, because of a weakness with that individual. So we see from all of these negation of Allah all of these negation of these sifat al-manfiya and sifat al-salbiya, it all reflects the total opposite of it, and that is the completion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the opposite of these names and these attributes. Sorry, of these attributes that we negate from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala negates from himself, or the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam negates from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as we mentioned, Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, he mentioned that everything that we negate from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, فالسمع قد أثبتت له من الأسماء الحسنى وصفات الكمال ما قد وردت فكل ما ضاد ذلك فالسمع ينفيه. The sam here is referring to what is meant by the sam is a naql, or the text, that everything that the sam has the text, the religious text, the Quran and the Sunnah, has affirmed from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala divine names and perfect attributes that have been narrated to us. And whatever is the opposite of these names and attributes, whatever is the opposite of these names and attributes, فَكُلُّ مَا ضَاءَ ذَلِكَ فَالسَّمْ يَنْفِيهِ. Meaning, here he's saying, and this here is the second where we mentioned before regarding how we negate something from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In the first statement, there are descriptions and attributes that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala negates from himself, or the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam negates from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whether directly by mentioning the negated attributes, and that is all that we went through. All of these attributes that we mentioned is from this category. And also what is negated from Allah is the opposite of that which we affirm, as we give the example of Sami and Basir, and that is the statement that he is mentioning here, that whatever we affirm for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that was transcribed to us from the text, from the Quran and the Sunnah, we negate from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the opposite of those things. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned that he is al-Qawi, he is the strong. We negate from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala weakness. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned that he is al-Halim, that he is the one who is forbearing. We negate from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not having forbearance or being hasty, and so on. We affirm for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala al-Alim, knowledge. We negate from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ignorance. So everything that is not befitting for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you will find that there is evidence to negate that from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, either by that negated attributes being mentioned directly, that it is not befitting of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or Allah negates it from himself, or by the understanding of that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has affirmed for himself. Inshallah ta'ala, we will end with this. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive us our sins and our shortcomings and our negligence, and I ask those listening to pardon me for maybe the slips and the little tight tongue that I had this morning, which is maybe due to lack of sleep. But alhamdulillah, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive us for whatever inaccuracy and negligence that we may have in our teaching, in our class. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept from us and to forgive us, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to benefit us from that which he has taught us. I think there's maybe something went wrong with the
No.
hearing or something. Okay. هذا وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وسلم سبحانك اللهم بحمدك ونشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت ونستغفرك ونتوب إليك السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. جزاكم الله خيرا wa barakallahu fikum. Alhamdulillah, we thank Allah Azza wa Jalla for another gathering and learning more about Him. Inshallah ta'ala, we'll continue with the program and it will be the last lecture of this conference, starting at 2:15, 2:20, inshallah, around this time. On the flyer is written 2 o'clock, but we're going to delay around 2:15, 2:20. Bi'idhnillahi ta'ala.